going to be great. All right. So now we are recording. All right. So Kevin, you got any questions or anything you want to say before we start?
No, I mean, just don't worry if you want to go back on anything and say, well, let me rephrase that, or you flub, don't worry about it, because I can edit things out. And so yeah, just tell me if you need to reword something, or if we said something that's like horribly offensive and you're like, wait, let's go back, say, let's use this is the correct term, but we'll do our best.
And I didn't send you a link to any of our other podcasts, did I?
Excuse me?
I didn't send you a link to our podcast, did I? Like you, so you could hear a previous episode. Just to kind of,
no.
Well, it's called Floods of Justice, with the idea of looking at topics from a biblical perspective, without the labels. So, you can talk about whatever you want to talk about, be as religious or non-religious as you want to be in your conversation. We got a small audience, but it's pretty broad. I mean, there's going to be everything from conservative evangelicals to progressive Christians to atheists. I mean, for a small audience, it's pretty broad. So awesome. We're kind of proud of that in that regard. A lot of different opinions. All right.
Cool.
All right, here we go. Well, Pastor Kevin, I think it's been almost a year since we did our last episode on immigration issues. It's pretty close to about a year. Sadly, I don't think the situation has improved at all in the last year. If anything, in America, so many things have declined, or it's hard to tell. Has it improved? Has it not improved? And we got to give some grace to the incoming administration. But today, I know we'll be talking with our guest about this issue. Any thoughts before we go into this, just on how far we've come, or where we're kind of headed?
Yeah, it's really been more than a year, at least when we recorded that episode. Pastor Luis and I went down to the border in El Paso, Texas. I think it was near the end of February, right before COVID hit, and then we toured both sides of the border with a nonprofit down there, and went to some shelters and heard some stories from some people, and with the plan that we would take a church group back down over the summer to so we could all learn together about what's really going on, or what we could learn in a short amount of time. And then COVID hit and other things became pressing. The issue didn't go away. The immigration issue did not go away. And now it's been back on the news the last few months because of just a surge of people trying to come to the United States. And, our relationship in Honduras gives me quite a bit of empathy, knowing that if I lived in some of the conditions that I've personally seen and heard stories of, and I had a chance to get to the United States, even if it may have been a less than legal way to do it, but I could do it, or I could get my kids there so they could have a better life. I would think as a parent, I would take that opportunity to come. And what was interesting, Luis and I were talking about this the other day, that on the flight down last year to El Paso, I sat by this gentleman who grew up in El Paso, and he was going back to visit his mom and dad. And this gentleman was probably in his mid 60s. So his parents were old, and he was going to visit with them. And he asked me where I was going to El Paso for. And I told him, and he talked about when he was growing up, his house and where he lived was literally on the border. And there was no fence, there was not anything. And they would ride their bikes back and forth. They had friends on both sides of the border, and his friends' parents would come to the States to work and then go back home at night. And some people in the States would go to Mexico and come home and then go back. We think that if it's a wide open border, everybody's just going to flood in here. Well, I think in reality, if it was an open border, people would stay on for the most part on their side, and it would definitely increase the economics on the Mexican side of things, because once the wall went up, all kinds of violence started erupting. And so, basically, if you open up the border, we have an open border with Canada, and and if we could have that same thing, I think a lot of the stuff that we see today would go.
And the Canadians don't want anything to do with us, huh?
Yeah, but have you seen those pictures? Like there's a stake like in somebody's backyard. I've seen them on pictures, and the stake says Canada. So on this side of the stake, you're in the United States. On the other side, you're in Canada, and there's no customs people within 100 miles, and it's just a just this freedom that really benefits, I think, both sides. Now, I don't know if that's what everybody's opinion is, and I may be thinking too simplistically, but what we're doing right now for sure is not working. And so
Yeah.
with this new uptick in reports from the border, I reached out through some friends of mine and and finally got a hold of our guest today. And our guest and I actually have met before, didn't know it at the time, but we have met before. And so with us today to help us with this immigration problem and just kind of give us some insight on what's going on is Gustavo um, de Los Rios. Did I say that right? Close enough? Gustavo,
that's
did I get
fine.
your last name right? All right.
Yes.
And he is with the Ibarra Borderland Connection, which is a nonprofit down on the border in El Paso. And he is the border encounter facilitator and the Juarez shelter connector. And so welcome, Gustavo. Welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
And well, just tell us,
Just-
first of all, just a little bit about yourself, and then how long you've been working on this issue.
Yeah, so I was born and raised here in El Paso. My whole life has been, migration. I mean, my parents came to the United States years ago, before I was born, and had me here. So, I'm a product of, understanding why parents want to go somewhere else to, improve their lives for their children. Um, right now, growing up on the border, so you sort of mentioned it earlier, people sort of going back and forth. My life has been that, uh, all growing up. I mean, I have family in Juarez, I have family here in El Paso. So you'll find me in Juarez on the weekends, visiting family, and during the week I'll be working here. So yeah, no, all my life has been like that, and it's always been really interesting. Something that growing up I didn't really, I guess, sort of see it as a unique thing until I was older and started seeing, what a unique situation I'm in, and such a privilege to just be here on the borderland and just being able to experience that. But yeah, that sort of led me into the work that I'm doing now with Abara. So Abara is a nonprofit organization that focuses on immigration education, um, as well as supporting other organizations and or shelters who are helping migrants through this journey. And so right now, my position at Abara is, like you mentioned, border encounter facilitator. And so we have border encounters. Before the pandemic, we had a whole lot of border encounters where people from different parts of the country would come and to learn about what's going on the border, what's going on with migration, and just through a lot of different perspectives as far as immigration through the Bible, um, hearing from Border Patrol agents, what's going on here at the border in El Paso and Juarez, as well as checking out, like for yourself, like what's going on in Juarez, talking to Mexican government officials on Juarez to see like what they feel and what's going on through their perspective. But yeah, that's sort of a recap of what's been going on right now in my life and sort of my upbringings. But yeah.
Well, give us a rundown on what a typical day is for you then, either with the border encounters or the shelter connector. I mean, what's kind of a typical day for you?
Yeah, so it sort of varies, each one. For border encounters, usually we'll have a group, and I'm typically organizing, um, along with my colleague Blanca. She's the other Juarez encounter facilitator. We sort of work together and try to figure out, what's the Juarez side going to look like as far as like where we're going to take folks to, either like different parts of the border wall, shelters, different government officials in Juarez, figure all that stuff out. And then sort of just accompanying the people who are coming to learn, through this like learning experience as far as, um, giving these different talks. We also do like immigration 101. I've been starting to take more of a lead in that as well. So doing a brief overview of what immigration law is here in the United States, which is a whole other ballpark and super confusing. And I understand why people think it's just a matter of like, hey, we just need to do this and we'll be fine. But the laws are just all over the place. And as far as like my Juarez shelter connector side, my main job there is to connect with shelters or people who are helping migrants to figure out how to make these connections, first of all, and figure out what is it that they need, and then seeing if we can fulfill that need, or trying to find funding for that need, or working with other people to collaborate for those needs. Because us as an organization, we're not looking to open a shelter. Um, that's not in our that's not part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to strengthen what's there on the ground right now. And there's a lot of people doing amazing things in Juarez. Um, and a lot of it's just supporting these people and just enforcing the efforts that are already on the ground. Mhm.
And most, now, at least when I was there, and I assume it's the same way, most of the shelters on the Juarez side are actually churches, right?
Yes, it's been it's been pretty fascinating to see and really encouraging to see even on both sides. The church has been the basically the leading force on this, as far as hosting people, offering a place to stay. And we had the same reaction here in El Paso before the migrant protection protocol went into place. Um, we had a lot of local churches that opened up their spaces to host migrant families who were coming through the border. And then when migrant protection protocol went into place, that's when it all flipped to Juarez, and you see the same response of like a lot of different and small churches just opening up their spaces, and something to consider is that some of these churches, a lot of these churches are just churches and they're small little buildings, and they don't have the capacity to hold 30, 40 people and host them for nights. Just, imagine having 40, 50 people in one small place with one bathroom, like all that stuff. Like it's pretty complicated, but a lot of people had, the heart, and were able just to, say, hey, we have a roof. We have people who are wanting to help, and you're more than welcome to stay here if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I remember right, at least one of the churches that we went to, or one of the pastors that we talked with, talked about the churches, at least at the height when it was really, really bad. They canceled all of their services and all their programs, basically for the one purpose of housing immigrants, and and there would be so many people they couldn't ask them to leave on a Sunday morning so they could have church. So basically, it was just get rid of the chairs, get rid of the pews, let's set up beds, and our mission and our ministry for however long it's going to take is to minister to these people who need more than it's hard to imagine what all the needs were, but I thought that was cool, because I think when in the States, we'd probably host you, Monday through Saturday, but Sunday morning we got to have our church service.
Yeah.
But they just said, no, this is what we need to do now, and this is all we're going to do. And I found that
Yeah.
encouraging.
It's been really interesting to see, especially because there's so many different churches who are hosting different denominations, and they all have different ways of running their shelters. But like you mentioned, a whole lot of them ended up sort of dropping whatever they were doing and just hosting and being amazing neighbors and hosts to these people who were coming in.
Well, now explain
couple.
how that happened. Because explain a little bit about the MPP, and really what happened was all of a sudden thousands of people were being sent back to Mexico, and there was nowhere for them to stay, and so this was a crisis. But just briefly, what is the MPP? When did that start, and how has that affected things?
Yeah, so MPP stands for Migrant Protection Protocol, which went into effect, I believe, about 2.5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to check. Don't quote me on that. Basically, it went into effect as initially it was to protect people, as the name states, but really what it was, I describe it as putting you in this waiting area, So basically, before MPP, you would come into the country, you would request asylum. They would give you a court date, uh, and then you would go to that court date later on, go through the process, and then you'll figure out whether you get to stay or go. Through MPP, basically what it did was that it restricted people coming into the country. So instead of coming in and asking for asylum, you were turned back. They would give you your court date, and then they would send you to Mexico. And that was, they sent you to Mexico because I believe it was part of like a third safe country, if I'm not mistaken. I'd probably have to go back and check that.
Mhm.
But it was deemed a safe country to go to. And so, and they were, the MPP program was only like facilitated for Spanish speaking countries. So that's why Honduras, Guatemala, and all those other countries were able to go there, and Cuba as well. We had migrants from Brazil, which speak Portuguese and not Spanish, and are technically not supposed to be in the migrant protection protocol, but somehow we're put in it. But basically, I sort of back off track. But basically, when MVP got in place, people were asked to like wait their court cases in Juarez. And well, people might argue like, well, what's the big deal? They're just staying somewhere else. The thing is that a lot of the people who were coming from their home countries have contacts, have family here in the U.S. who are able and willing to receive them and take care of them. Um, and the big curveball was that when they were sent back into Mexico, they don't have those contacts. They don't have any contacts in Mexico. And so they were sort of sent off to fend for themselves because no contacts. I mean,
Mhm.
family members are usually all around the U.S. And it's not like they're just in the border cities. They're all across the U.S. And so it's hard to get any help to these people. So yeah, it was very damaging,
Mhm.
just to have that program in place.
Yeah, because if I can back it,
Um,
if I can back up just a little
yeah.
bit, and again, this is just some things that I know and stories that I've heard. Like if a person's coming and they're asking for asylum, first of all, they're coming and presenting themselves at the border. They're not sneaking into the border. They're coming and presenting themselves and saying, I want asylum. And so a lot of times it's because they are running from violence. Their family has been threatened, or they've had family members killed for various reasons, and so they come, and so in the past they would ask for asylum, and then, as you said, they would be sent to a family member who lived in the States somewhere, and that family member would take care of them. And now what happened under this policy, which we would call remain in Mexico kind of thing, I guess, is what the average person who doesn't live on the border would think of it as. Well, instead of going and staying with a family, they had to go, and they had nowhere to go. They couldn't go back home where they were from, or else they would be killed. And so you ended up having a bunch of people who had nowhere to go, and then the churches, stepped in and try to provide for them. But one of the things that went around was that if you let them come to the United States to await their court hearing, the majority of them never show up for their court hearing. Is that true, that the majority don't show up if they're in the United States? They don't show up for their court hearing?
No, that's not true. In fact, there's a really high turnout rate for people going to their court hearings. I'd have to like, we have numbers like in our office, and I could go back and send that to you guys. But there's actually a high turnout rate for people who are being released in the United States and going to the court hearings, because a lot of these people are families. These aren't people who are just coming into the country just for no reason. They're trying to do this the legal way per se. Like how, and everybody wants them to do the legal way, but then they're trying. Except that it's just a long process. But no,
Yeah.
the turnout rate for people going to the court hearings is high.
Yeah, I've heard
Um,
anywhere from 80 to 92 or 93% actually show up
yeah,
for their court case.
yeah, and I guess one thing to point out is that just because they're led into the country doesn't mean that they automatically stay in the country. These are still court hearings. These
Mhm.
are these are still things that are still pending in court, and they need to figure out whether they have a case to stay in the United States or not. So, unfortunately, a lot of those people actually were deported too. Like, there's also like a good amount of people who were deported back to their countries.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
pretty.
President Obama like holds the record, doesn't he, of deporting the most people.
Mhm.
But yet he also seemed to have a little bit more compassionate model as far as entering the country. But I think what people need to hear is that it is perfect, it is legal, and it is constitutionally correct for anyone to come to our border and to ask for asylum. There is nothing illegal about that. And that's the proper way. That's the proper way to do it. And then you let the courts figure out if the asylum is legitimate or not. And so this, what's been going on to me is just a bunch of fear and a bunch of half truths or whole lies, whichever way you want to look at it, to try to just keep people. And the majority of them, want to come for a better life. This idea that they're all gang members and all criminals is just not accurate. Doesn't mean there's not some of those, but the majority of them are. There was a kind of a Christian poster who several years ago said that a person coming through our southern border has a better chance of being an evangelical Pentecostal pastor than he does a gang member.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that statement, just because the way I see it, and especially like growing up, I mean, people, I mean, especially like people who are in control of those situations, those gang members, they don't want to leave a place where they're in control. Why would they want to come to a place
Right.
where they don't have any power, where they don't have any say?
Yeah.
The people who are fleeing are because they are being controlled.
Yeah.
They're being threatened, their lives are in stake.
Yeah.
And that's a perfectly good reason to leave your country and try
Yeah.
to find help somewhere else.
So if they're a gang member, in actuality, they're probably a gang member trying to get out of the gang. And the only way to get out of the gang is really to get to the United States, so you're tired. I mean, there was a story, I told somebody that story because I'd heard the same stories from my Honduran friends. And I told somebody that story that, look, you got a person, technically they're a gang member, but they're wanting a better life. And so they come to the United States so they won't have to be a gang member anymore. And then they get sent back to their city. Within a matter of days, they are killed. And not only are they killed, but they're killed in brutal ways to make as an example of, if you're a gang member, don't you dare do this. And then I told a group of people that, and then like 3 days later, there was a long article in like the New York Times about a person who was just like that. They were 28 years old, which is old for a gang member. And he wanted a better life. He came to the States. And they deported him back, and he pleaded, if I go back, they're going to kill me. And they sent him back, and within a matter of days, he was dismembered. He was killed and dismembered and left out in the public for everybody to see him. He was from Honduras, which is why it caught my attention. But it's like the stories that I had heard and the people I had talked to, this is exactly what happened. And I'm thinking, as Christians, if our hands are bloody if we think just deport them all, because we don't know. We're not listening to what they say, why they're here, and what's going to happen to them when they get back.
Yeah, and I mean, even just to that point, I mean, just to add on to your point, a lot of these people who are even in these gangs have been recruited at a very young age, and for a lot of these people, that's just a way out in some way, because
they didn't have a choice. They had to join. They had to become a gang member.
Either they joined because they wanted to, keep them from hurting their family members or even killing them, or or just or flee, like, because some people either join or flee, and there's many different circumstances. But a lot of those people who are even in the gangs, a lot of them don't want to be there, but have been recruited at such a young age and don't have a way out. And like you mentioned, they might leave, but even like the policies here in the U.S. for immigration, being in a gang, like being affiliated with the gang, is such a big red flag, and usually it almost immediately like disqualifies people for any sort of relief. And so, but we don't know their stories. We don't know maybe why they were in there. Maybe they chose to. Maybe they were recruited. and unfortunately, sending them back isn't the answer,
Yeah.
And like you said, yeah, a lot of the times when people get sent back, it's only a matter of time for when they get killed or something.
Yeah. Kevin, you got anything to say?
No. I think I have a lot more empathy for somebody who may have a gang history in their background than if they have a Republican history in their background. I'm a lot more judgmental going, oh, okay, I maybe they were forced into the Republican Party because they were raised in it by their family, or I mean, I need to take this advice for myself here. So I feel like our country is so divided on so many issues, and immigration is one of the biggest. But I hear you describing the asylum situations and the gang situations, and I feel like a huge part of America, especially the evangelical Christian side, lumps everybody in as just an illegal immigrant. They don't even consider the reasons for seeking asylum. It feels like they're on this boat and everybody in the water is in shark infested water in a feeding frenzy trying to get into this boat, and they're pushing them back in the water going, no, you're illegal. You didn't buy a ticket to be on this boat, without any consideration of what they're living in out in the water there. So it was encouraging for me to hear you say that the churches down there have really united. Is there any division within the churches? Is there still the response that that we're seeing maybe in Tennessee, or is everybody on the ground there in El Paso, are they compassionate and seeing and empathizing and going, no, we need to respond and care for the immigrants here? Or is there still some pushback?
Like the majority of what I've seen is like a great response and a great welcoming per se. I can't speak and say like that everybody has the same opinion. I'm sure there's people who oppose it, and I'm sure even people in different churches do. But the majority of what I've seen is just people welcoming and genuinely trying to care for these people. And that might just be because I'm hanging around like other people who are helping, but
Yeah.
I can say that there's a lot of help. There's a lot of people who are genuinely welcoming people in on both sides, not just here, not just there in Juarez, on both sides. There's a lot of people who care.
Pastor Kevin, am I way off? Are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing in Tennessee? I mean, it almost seems like the polar opposite. Like the norm out here is what the minority is for Gustavo down there.
Yeah, at least in where we live, the buckle of the Bible Belt, it's if you can't come legally, don't come at all. And even pastors, and I've had conversations with pastors and that have almost ended in arguments because I disagree with them, that will say if an illegal immigrant were to come to their church and quote unquote become a Christian, that their advice to them would be to go back to their home country and try to come in legally. And I'm like, well, no. We're not obligated to obey unjust laws, and some of these laws are not just at all. Especially if by going back to the country you would be killed. And unfortunately, there's been studies that show that the most intolerant immigration people are evangelical Christians. When they break out into the groups of the different percentages of who want. Now everybody wants immigration reform, and I think the goal would be that everybody needs to come legally, but instead of making that difficult, you need to make it easy. The easier the better. And then for people who have been in the States for quite some time illegal, and I hate that word illegal. I mean, undocumented may be better because nobody is illegal. I mean, you're a human being, so there's there's a documented immigrant and an undocumented immigrant. So if you're undocumented, well, there needs to be a path to citizenship, because again, the majority of these people are hardworking people. The same people, Kevin, who are in the churches complaining about illegal immigration. If they own property for rentals, they're the same people who want Hispanics to rent their property, and if they're illegal, you're going to get if an illegal undocumented immigrant is renting your property, they're going to pay on time in cash because they don't want any attention drawn to themselves. So the same people who are saying no, don't come here, will be the first ones to put them in their rental units because they know they're going to get and they'll be the first ones to hire them because if they're undocumented, then you can hire them and pay them less money than what they deserve. So it's like everything else; it becomes hypocritical. Yeah, up here, what you hear a lot, Gustavo, is the idea of sanctuary city being a bad thing, and and everybody needs to, everybody needs to come in the legal way, but without realizing that sometimes that's next to impossible. Or you tried it the legal way, you got sent back to Mexico, so the next time you do it, you're going to come in an illegal way. And if you've got enough money, you can pay somebody to get you anywhere in the United States safe and sound,
Yeah, and
and basically live hidden the rest of your life.
Yeah, and even just like you mentioned, like just the legal way. I think for a lot of those people who are saying like, well, why don't they just come the legal way? I think for those people, I would like encourage like for you to find out what the legal way is.
Mm-hmm.
Like get educated in that aspect. Because our immigration laws are a mess. And even with this new with MPP, there was no clear way of like what the legal way was.
Mm-hmm.
Things were always changing. People consistently trying to do it the legal way, but we're told no. Everything was inconsistent. So for me, it's always important just for people just to sort of like try to get those answers themselves. Like if they're saying like, well, come here legally. Well, what is the legal way? Like do a little like research, and then there's a lot of organizations that are willing to help with that. There's a lot of resources online. The USCIS website has a lot of, they have all their forms, all their documents, and all their procedures. It's just a difficult process. It's not just a black and white answer. Like it's not just a black and white. It's just like it's very complex, and it's something that I would hope like more people would like get encouraged to like learn about and see what we're sort of like trying to say, like this are these laws aren't doing it for us right now, and it's not doing it for anybody.
No, it's not. It's harming everybody. And again, this is anecdotal because but the immigrants, both documented and undocumented, that I've talked with will tell you if they had their way, they would like to go back home. They don't want to stay here. Someone put it this way: we as people in the United States, we think that immigrants are trying to get here because we're the promised land, when in reality we're Egypt, and they're just trying to escape danger. And as soon as the danger is over with, they want to go, back home. And so we it's not what if you don't know, or if it's like anything else, proximity. If you don't know people who are involved in this, and you haven't heard their stories, and you haven't walked at least a few steps in their shoes, and seen what it is they're trying to escape from, then see what a mess it is down there. Because I have close friends who are right in the middle of a messy immigration and live thing right now, and they're in Tennessee and live with this kind of constant fear that at any given moment something could happen, and for no fault on their own, and they could get deported because the immigration system is such a mess, and no one wants to fix it. But let's take a break, Kevin, and Gustavo. When we come back after the break, let's talk about the unaccompanied minor situation, what's really going on, and maybe explain the differences between President Trump's policies and Obama's policies before him, and now Biden's policy after him, and just kind of explain that situation to us.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Reader. All right.
That's the break.
Yep. I'll insert the break in post. We are here with Gustavo de los Rios from El Paso and an organization called Ibarra Borderlands Connections. And we've been talking about the immigration situation along our southern border. And we're going to shift and talk a little bit about unaccompanied minors and all that. But I did want to touch on the website for your organization is abarafrontiers.org.
Yes,
Right.
frontiers.org.
And if you go there, you'll see there's a tab for these encounters, which is Gustavo's official title is a border encounter facilitator. So everything that you're hearing about today, if you want to go and live it firsthand and see, you need to go to their website here and contact Gustavo and set this up. And we're going to continue the discussion here, but there, like Pastor Kevin says, he has firsthand experience in talking with immigrants seeking asylum and immigrants from other countries. And if you don't have that firsthand experience, in my opinion, you really can't form a proper opinion on the subject. So I commend you, Gustavo, for what you're doing down there. I would love to go down and experience one of the encounters. So if anybody listening is interested in the same thing, it's Abara Frontiers, ABRA Frontiers with an S at the end.org, and check that out. And we'll go ahead and continue the discussion now. But Pastor Kevin, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, Gustavo, if you would, one of the things that, I think people get confused about is they hear unaccompanied minors. I don't know if you saw the one video that was all over the news that showed the people on the Mexico side of the border. I'm not sure if it was in El Paso or if it was in the Brownsville area or somewhere else, where they dropped the two kids on the other side of the fence. Did you see that video? And there was like a 2-year-old.
I did see that video.
There's like a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. And people talk about how horrible that was. And I try to tell them, well, first of all, the coyotes who did that knew that they'd probably be on camera and be picked up just like that. So that, and so it wasn't like they were just dropping them and they were going to die. I think they knew what would happen. It's still a horrible situation, but you have those unaccompanied minors, and then you have stories of the administration taking children away from their parents and then putting them in these cages. And are they really cages, or are they just overcrowded facilities? And so there's all kinds of stuff going on about unaccompanied minors and what happens to them and the living conditions that they're in. And so just, what's your take on all that, and maybe some of the differences between the last 3 administrations, Obama's administration, Trump's administration, and now Biden's administration?
Yeah. So I guess the main thing to point out would be that, these detention facilities aren't meant to hold people for family members. They're meant for single adult males. And if you could backtrack like years before, like even during the Obama administration and before, the main people who were coming to our borders were single adult males. So these facilities are very much tailored to that group of people. When we started getting a mass influx of family units, moms, dads, children, these facilities aren't meant to hold and keep people for long periods of time in those facilities. So you'll see a lot of these facilities being flooded, and like just they don't have enough capacity to hold all these people. One of the main things I think to point out when it comes to these different administrations is like motives, or like the intentions, because the previous administration under the zero tolerance policy was to rip families apart, rip children from their biological parents and or legal guardians. And something to understand when they're talking about unaccompanied minors, what an unaccompanied minor is, or what they define a parent as, is a legal guardian or biological parent, either mom or dad. So a child might not be coming necessarily alone. They might be coming with an older brother, with a cousin, with a grandma. But since they're not their biological mom or dad, and they're not their legal guardian, they might come with a family member, but they are considered unaccompanied due to the policies, to our policies. So that's where they would be taken away.
Now, was that the policy as far back as Obama as well, or did it change under Trump and Biden just continued it, or what?
I believe that's something that's been in place for a while in our policies. Like, that's what they define a parent as. But again, I have to go back and check just time frame. But that is the situation right now. That's what a parent or legal guardian is, and those were the people who have legal custody of children. And so, under the previous administration, under their zero tolerance policy, they were basically um, taking away children from their legal guardians, and if not, like their actual biological parents. It wasn't They weren't being taken away from aunts or uncles or even older siblings. They were being taken away from their actual biological parents, and which that was just very, I mean, a horrible experience for everybody, just super traumatic for the children. I can't imagine.
Yeah, and
just
even
give me
after they were told, to stop doing that, they continue to do it, right?
Yeah, it took a while until it finally came to a halt. I'd have to double check more or less when they did stop, but it took a while until it just started making a lot of noise in the media, and it took a while. It took too long. That's something that should have never happened. But it was something that was, I believe, put in place just to, I don't know, almost as an example,
Yeah.
like,
So today, an
for-
unaccompanied minor may be taken away from their brother or cousin, but they're not taken away from their parent or guardian.
Correct. Yes. Because unfortunately, that's how our laws are.
Yeah.
A grandma or anybody who doesn't have legal custody cannot be responsible for a child. So unfortunately, that you still see that happening, but if their parents are with them or if they're with a legal guardian, then that won't happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess, and then right now, just sort of going into like your previous question about like just the facilities right now and people being like the living situations. I mean, I think just sort of backtracking and sort of talking about like just how they're not prepared for those situations is that right now it's hard to say, like as far as like with the unaccompanied children who are arriving at our borders and who are being placed into these like so and so like cages and whatnot. Like the difference was like under the Trump administration, it was about zero tolerance, like almost setting an example of like this was going to happen. Under this administration, it's literally that all the detention facilities are over capacity, and especially with COVID right now. I mean, it's a big danger to have so many children in one place like that, and I mean, that's something that should be addressed in the detention facilities. I think, I don't know, like something that they're just not prepared for, and I understand like why sort of this is happening, but right now, like I guess, man, let me sort of backtrack on that. I guess like what I'm trying to say is that nobody was ready for that, I guess, and the resources like are still haven't been put there to like help reduce numbers or help minimize those things. Right now there's in El Paso we have Fort Bliss, our military base, and right now they're opening up the military base to host migrant children, unaccompanied children. Right now I believe they have a capacity for 500, or at least they've set up for 500 unaccompanied children, with potentially expanding up to 5,000 unaccompanied children. And I think just the main difference is that they're just trying to, I feel like they're trying to just unclutter the massive amount of people who are coming, and that are in these detention facilities, because right now we're in a pandemic, and I mean it's dangerous to have people like a lot of people in the same place. But I mean, it's also a big red flag that it's in a military base, that they're sort of far away. It seems like they're doing a good job as far as taking care of them, but there's still its pros and cons, and I think it's something that we just won't find an answer to right now.
Now, have you seen? I mean, everybody talks about the increase. Have you seen the increase since the Biden administration took over? So, like since January, have more people of all ages been coming than May of the previous year or two?
What I have seen is people still coming.
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily be able to say that like I've seen more. Um,
I mean, there's so many people
I-
coming. A few thousand more doesn't seem
Yeah.
to make a difference, right?
yeah, the thing is, like, people are still coming. The only difference is that right now, because of the pandemic, we have Title 42, which is this law that basically was set in place, I think even over like 100 years ago, was like a sort of a precaution for some sort of health related issue to like not to sort of even like just close our border down. And that had to like sort of go back, but I believe it was over 100 years ago that was set in place. So we're following this policy that was over 100 years in place. And right now, when the Biden administration came in, they opened up a way for the people in the migrant protection protocol to start slowly coming into the country and waiting their court cases here, which that was a big win. People were super happy about that. They're finally, after, some of them over 2 years have been waiting in Juarez, are now finally across and are waiting for their cases in the United States. So on the one hand, you have like this extreme like joy, this happiness that people are coming in. On the other hand, you have people who are subject to Title 42, who, because of this, are being returned to Mexico, and are unfortunately like they're just basically being returned, and are there right now. There isn't a way for them to ask for asylum. Like there really isn't a proper way to even do so right now. Basically, it's almost saying like we're closed down we're closed, almost, to put it like simple terms, like we just sort of closed it off and that's it. And so it's sort of it feels weird because it sort of feels like we've sort of even like backtracked in a way where we're sort of back to square one, if not worse, because these people aren't even given the chance to seek asylum. Like these people don't have court dates, they don't have anything. They were just returned, and they're still being returned. Right now, they're not accepting any new asylum cases. Right now, they're only focusing on the people who have already and who are waiting in Mexico.
Okay, so right now, if you're asking for asylum, it's just an automatic no, go back to Mexico.
Yeah, I'm at automatic now. Yeah.
Unless,
Yeah,
at least
and-
with the Title 42, unless it's a minor. Minors may not
Yeah,
be
unless
automatically
you're
sent.
a minor, you're able to seek asylum. But any other reason, nope. Like you're returned, and it's just a very horrible situation that we didn't expect to be in after this previous administration. So that's why there's a lot of fight going on to get rid of this policy, because like you mentioned before, everybody should have the right to seek asylum. If their life depends on it, they should have the right.
So in some
There are
ways,
people-
things have gotten worse under this administration than the previous administration. In some ways, maybe better, but in some ways, it's gotten worse.
Yeah, and I just think that it's something that, in order to see significant change and positive change, it needs to be through the legislation. Like,
Yeah.
it just can't be a president just giving executive orders.
Yeah.
Those are almost empty promises. I would dare to say, just because they're only there until he's there, and who knows what the next administration is going to say. It's good for certain things. I know at the beginning of his term, he signed an executive order to assign a task force to reunite the people,
Mm-hmm.
the children who were separated from their parents under the zero tolerance policy. So that was great, and that was necessary for that moment, because they needed action right now. But for long-term immigration, there does need to be a reform that completely of our laws. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like everything else in the States, it's become so politicized that no one really wants to look at what true reform would look like. Because you got to think, I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but you got to think that, okay, we are smart enough to come up with a better way of handling this, but the problem is, if the Democrats are in power, the Republicans don't want them to get the credit for solving it, and the Republicans are in power, the Democrats don't want to get them credit for solving it. And so they
Mhm.
stand in each other's way. And it hurts the most marginalized among us. And one of the things I wanted to say earlier, the Bible's clear. The Old Testament mentions 4 groups of people we're to take care of. And one, it basically is the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the immigrant. And then Jesus, in his parable of sheep and goats, mentioned very clearly that you welcome the stranger, and that's how you know that you're a sheep instead of a goat. And the whole idea is, at least in the Old Testament, you were a foreigner in a strange land, and so treat the foreigner like you wanted to be treated. And then as Christians, we are simply travelers or sojourners in this land. This world is not our home. And so in essence, we're all immigrants to a degree. And so we are to treat immigrants as if we were immigrants ourselves, because in essence we are. And then of course Jesus says, treat others the way that you want to be treated. So I mean that should be that should be all. It's okay if I'm an immigrant coming, fleeing poverty, fleeing violence, fleeing the threats of death, and I can get to the States, or I can send my kids to the States. If I was that person, how would I want to be treated once I got to the border? And as a follower of Jesus, then that's how we are to treat them, because that's how we want to be treated. And right now, we're not treating them like we want to be treated. We're treating them as if they're less than human, almost.
Yeah, and I think you hit like the nail on the head with that last statement. We got to remember that these people are people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these people, many times, I put my faith to shame,
Mm-hmm.
just due to how much these people are solely relying on God, through this part of their journey,
Yes.
have taught me so much, and it's just incredible to see that, how these people who are, even like I said, have put my faith to shame,
Mm-hmm.
are just being treated less than,
Yeah.
just because they're from another country. But we need to, for me, it's just a matter of we need to, I don't know how we're gonna do it because we're such a big country with just over politicizing everything.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to stop doing that and just start seeing the humanity in it, because I think something that I've seen, just when we have border encounters, is just I think people being able to put the faces to these issues is a big difference. Just finally being able to put a face on an illegal immigrant, like
Yeah.
that might be a 7-year-old child, and seeing how that actually, the reality, I think nowhere in the Bible does talk about an illegal alien or something. We just hear about people. And I think the main thing is just remembering we're all people. We shouldn't be treated as less. And that's something so big, so common, so, I don't know, I would say so basic, but it's something that needs to be reminded of, because there's a lot of these people who have, I mean, I've heard many stories, working for Abara, so many stories that that they've gone through these horrible journeys just to get here. And this one particular story, I've heard of this man who came from, I believe, Honduras, went through this whole journey to get up here, was, beaten, so, during his excursions, and finally getting here, he went through all this trouble, through all this mess, and what did it for him, what just what sort of destroyed his motives to come here, was just the treatment of how he was treated here in the U.S. by these officers. It wasn't him being beaten or tortured. It was the treatment from somebody who was here in the U.S. and our border from our ICE and all those different agencies. Which is amazing to me, just because I've heard many stories of these people who are being treated horribly in these detention facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Who would You'll hear this a lot if you talk to enough people, that they feel like they're being treated like dogs
Mm-hmm.
in these detention facilities, and it's horrible. And that's a big thing is just remembering these people are people. This isn't just a political issue. you know Stop seeing it like that. Start seeing the humanity.
Yeah, that's good. Kevin, you got anything to add? That's good there at the end.
Yeah, no, this is Gustavo. I appreciate the conversation today. It's one of those things that we'll need to keep talking about until we have a solution and stop talking and start doing. Is there anything, I know on the website you can donate directly to Abara. Is there anything, if somebody's out there saying, all right, how can I get involved? How can I support effectively and not just, virtue signaling? What can they really do to make a difference right now for some of these people, these human beings that need our help?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I always encourage everybody to do is get educated in the topic. I think everybody needs to be educated more in this topic, and it's something that is consistently changing. Because once you do that, you're able to understand the situation more. Um, but aside from just educating yourself, there's also, like you mentioned, donating to our websites, to our organization, or other organizations who are doing the same work on the border. We have different ways that you can get involved as far as like volunteering. I know we've had even like translating groups for people who need documents translated for their cases. Um, if you get in contact with us, we're more than happy to find something for you to do. But there's also, we have our Amazon wish list, which is posted on our website, these are donations from like shoes to baby formula to diapers that will be sent to shelters and or other organizations who are helping migrants who desperately need these resources. Mhm. But it should be like in our website. And if you have any questions or about how to get involved more efficiently or anything, you guys are always free to contact us. Mhm.
Great. Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, and I'll throw this out there. We'll see. This may get me in trouble, Kevin. But if there were like maybe 12 people who wanted to have a border encounter, contact me, and we could get a group of 12 is a good size, right? Right, Gustavo?
I believe so. I need to double check, but I know right now we're currently taking border encounters. I have to double check on the numbers.
Okay.
But yes, right now we're currently taking border encounters again, like with their precautions and
Yeah,
everything.
but is 12 people a good size?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
think
if there's 12 people who want to go, maybe we could put something together late summer, early fall, and go down and we'll request Gustavo.
Yeah, no, I'll be happy to receive you guys for sure. You guys are
So
always
just contact us. I think everybody knows how to contact me, or just or put something on the message on the podcast, or my email is kevin@franklincommunitychurch.org. Twitter is, I don't know, what is it? What's my Twitter, Kevin? I forgot.
Riggs_Kevin.
And send me a private message or something. And man, yeah, if we could get 12 people together, I would assume with airlines and everything, it would be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 a piece, probably. That's just a guess, but because it's way too far to drive, so we'd have to fly. And but yeah, if we could get 12 people who are interested in going, we might put something together and come down there and see you.
Oh, definitely, that'd be great. We'll more than welcome to receive you guys.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's good to see you again. And the more I look at you, you may have been our van driver one day down in.
I'm pretty sure
when we went in the Juarez. So good to see.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did.
You going to go to Kansas City in November for CCDA?
I think so. Right now we haven't even talked about CCDA. I know
hands are kind of tied.
Yeah, I think we were planning on doing attending the regional one here.
Okay.
In person. I think it was supposed to be in Phoenix or something.
Okay.
But then ended up being just online. So
yeah.
I mean, I think if it ends up that we're able to go, I think we will. So I hope so.
Well, good. Hopefully I'll see you up there. And who was your other? Who's Blanca
Castillo?
Blanca. She may have been the one that took us. That name's familiar. The one day we toured the wall, and we went down to some monument on the El Paso side of the wall.
Sure.
She may have been the one that talked to us about that day. So tell her I said, hey, if that's who it is.
Yeah. And I'm sure you probably know Keisha Branch as well.
Yeah. So
she's part of our team as well.
Yeah. Well, CCDA is just one big family. So
Yeah, definitely.
You can cut all that out, Kevin, if you want to. I mean, or
Yeah, no, it's all
or
right.
we're plugging CCDA one way or the other.
Yeah.
Cecilia,
Well,
if you
thank you
see
guys
this, we're
for-
plugging you. So, give us a break on registration fees.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Definitely.
All right, man. Thank you
Yeah,
so
well,
much.
thank you guys for all the work that you guys do and for this podcast. I mean, this is awesome work, and especially just getting the word out right now.
Well,
That's awesome
it's
and
got to get
busy.
out. Yeah, it's got to get people's attitudes have got to change on this whole thing. And we got to get, as evangelical Christians, we got to get over our fear of the other. We just got to that. Revival. You're praying for revival, and God may be sending you to people who could bring revival through our borders, and then we're shutting them out. And they're the very ones who are bringing revival with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know God's got to
exactly.
smuggle them in.
He's got to smuggle them in.
Like-
Yeah.
Yeah. We think we're going to enlighten and minister and go on these missionary trips to bring Jesus to people. And he's like, no, I got to sneak them in because you guys keep pushing them out.
Yep, that's exactly what it
All
is.
right, now we're going to meddling now, so we better.
Yeah.
All
All right,
right,
buddy.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Gustavo.
all right.
Yeah,
Take care.
thank you. Thank
All
you
right,
guys.
take
For sure.
care.
Y'all take care.
Bye-bye.
And I did hit record, so we're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
All right, so I'll get you. Hopefully this time it'll work. I hadn't heard back from Lindsay on trying to move it again to. It's like she may have said it was okay, but it looks like is it going to be 4 and 5 o'clock now? You think on the days that we record because of your work schedule?
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to do that. It's pretty consistent now that I got to be there.
Yeah, is 4 o'clock good, or we got to back it up an hour or even later?
No, I mean, if we're doing a remote podcast, then 4 o'clock is fine. I can usually get out of there on a day. If I need to drive to Franklin, like tomorrow, we'll just be picking up Gideon and running straight up because he's out at 3:15. So I should be up there by 4.
But now, would it be easier for us to do it remote? I mean, I know you've had a rough week, so I don't know.
We actually have to zip up to Franklin anyway because Josh needs to get to a Bank of America. And there's no Bank of Americas down here, so we got to come up anyway.
Okay, and then the following week is Louise, and we could do that remote. That'd give you a week off.
Okay, that
for
works.
that. And okay, all right, man. I appreciate you.
All right.
See Andrew, tell him I said, hey, been praying for him, and I hate that he's going through it, but I'm thrilled that it's not cancer. So
Yeah. Me too.
yeah,
He's still acting like it's nothing. We're like, it's not nothing. It's not
No.
cancer, but it's not nothing.
well, he's 22. He's
Yeah, I know. Oh, he was leaving the hospital with Mandy, and he was like, "Oh, elevator buttons," and he went to lick them, and Mandy's like,
oh, that's
she
good.
hit him, yeah, right in the